The show begins by introducing Bai and Myrae and her mother, Ayan. They have a close relationship and help each other get ready in the morning. However, Myrae is overworking herself and falls asleep whenever she gets a chance. When she arrives at the office, she quickly wakes up upon hearing that the CEO is coming. All the employees crowd into the elevator as their royal secret inspector arrives. He was just stopping by J-Mart but noticed many problems with how they were managing things until he reaches the Tteokbokki stand. Myrae confidently speaks with the CEO, explaining that her mother, Ayan, works there and gives out generous portions because children are great at promoting the business. The CEO is impressed with their business skills and even asks for her name. After he leaves, Myrae faints and is taken to the hospital. She often overworks herself, and this time she's carried to the ward. The hero in this situation is security guard Naum Ta-Pyeon. He stays by Myrae's side, but while she's resting, things take a bad turn. They are called back home because there is a fire at apartment 302. Both Myrae and Ayan rush home and find out that their pet dog, Metal, is perfectly fine. Thankfully, their youngest son, Hyunjae, is safe too. The fire might be connected to an earlier scene in the episode where a mysterious man appeared at the apartment building. He entered room 302 in a suspicious way. Later during the fire, we see someone being carried out of the building, covered in a white sheet and taken away on a stretcher. It seems to be the previous landlord, but the exact cause of this and what's really happening is still unknown. However, some of the residents think this could be an arson attack because only apartment 302 was burned. Anyway, they now have a new landlord who apparently paid for the apartment in cash. The real estate agent calls the residents to share this news, and unfortunately, one of the apartments will need to be vacated so the new landlord can move in. At the end of the day, the camera shows the apartment with burn matches on the ground. The big issue in the story is about Ayan's husband, who is also Myrae's father. Myrae and Ayan had kicked him out of the apartment, and shortly after, news spread that he died when his bike was hit on the road, most likely by a white truck. He passed away at the hospital while getting treatment. The rude new owner, who they believe is Oh Ja-jeol, wants to move in himself. The agreement was made with the previous landlord's daughter, so it's all legally binding. The problem is, our main characters don't have the money to find a new place to live. Ayan also tells little Hyunjae to keep quiet when a stressed Myrae comes home. Myrae already has too much to deal with, and after paying debts and bills, there isn't much money left. The last thing she needs is to know they have to move soon. The next day, Ayan dresses up like a secret agent and decides to meet the landlord's daughter. She demands a contract renewal extension and asks her to sign it. However, the daughter can't sign it because she has already sold the building. She sold it because she couldn't pay the inheritance tax. She is also grieving her father's death and is having a hard time coping. The new landlord gave her a way out, and she took it. The woman from Unit 301 who had flirted with the new landlord earlier sends him messages asking to stay, and he agrees. She even sends some cute pictures of herself and is as surprised that he agreed as Ayan is. Another tenant, who has a young child, tries to stay by writing a cute letter pretending it's from her child. These tricks are enough to make Ayan try to gain sympathy by telling a sad story. As she talks about her tough situation, it turns out that the man they met isn't actually the landlord, he's just the representative. The real landlord listens to Ayan's story about being a struggling widow, but he hasn't made up his mind yet. Myrae and Ayan are very close, partly because of their past. In the absence of Myrae's father, Ayan acted like her own Wonder Woman, doing everything she could to help her family. Myrae admired her mother, and they form an unbreakable bond. This is why Myrae works so hard for her family. She wants to repay her mom for all her sacrifices and debts. That night, the three of them have their yearly ceremony to honor Myrae's father and Ayan's husband. Ayan says some encouraging words to him, telling Mu-jin to move on to the next life. But when they turn around, Mu-jin is actually standing right there. As they see him, the scene ends on a tense cliffhanger. Just when it looks like Ayan is about to faint, Mu-jin steps forward and catches her, holding her close. When he lets go, he reveals that he is the real owner of the villa. Back at the villa, the estranged father of Baya Mu-jin returns home. The family is shocked to see him, and it quickly becomes clear that Ja-jeol is just the agent in this situation, a middleman in this messy family drama. To understand how complicated this situation is, we flash back to 11 years ago. Ayan and Mu-jin had a fierce fight over the custody of their children. Outside the family court, Ayan admitted that meeting Mu-jin was the worst thing that ever happened to her, though their children were the one bright spot in their lives. Mu-jin was an entrepreneur, constantly coming up with new ideas to make money. Eventually, he did strike it rich, but how he became wealthy is still unclear. Hyunjae is more open with his father, especially when they look at the damage in apartment 302. But Myrae, on the other hand, is cold and distant. She disowned her father long ago after a falling out, and now she tells him to go through her if there are any issues about the apartment or moving. Myrae considers taking out a loan to move away from the villa, but Aeon isn't so sure. Unfortunately, their search for a new place is unsuccessful, as nothing meets their needs. They spend the entire day looking at other apartments, but don't find anything worth buying. Meanwhile, the other residents at the villa start sucking up to their new landlord, only to be shocked when they discover he's related to Aeon and Myrae. One of the residents at the villa, Lee Jong-hyuk, keeps a close watch on Mu-jin. He's suspicious about the fire and thinks the new landlord might be behind it. Supporting this idea is Mu-jin himself, who takes out some matches and seems ready to light a cigarette. He stops, almost in a trance, and remember, we saw burned matches in episode 1-2. Also, Jad-gail secretly tells Mu-jin that he'll handle the landlord situation quietly. Meanwhile, we get a random montage of Mam Ta-pyong waking up and getting ready for work. It's unclear why we're seeing this, especially since we don't know much about him. Anyway, when he arrives at work, he ends up in the elevator with Myrae. Just like in episode 1, he presses the button for floor 10 for her, remembering what she said before. It looks like these two are definitely heading toward a romance. After Myrae's ex-boyfriend makes a big scene outside her workplace, she decides to go home but ends up grazing her knee. Ta-pyong shows up to help her again and gives her a ride on his bike. However, what Myrae really needs is to escape her exhausting routine. She works so hard and doesn't have much to show for it. That night, while sitting with her friend, Myrae decides she's not going to date anymore. She already has too many problems, and dating would only add to her stress, even though Ta-pyong seems like the perfect guy for her. Plus, he practices taekwondo in his free time. Keep this in mind, readers. It might be important later on. Speaking of men, we cut back to Mu-jin, who is getting dressed after relaxing at the bathhouse. He has a scar on his arm, but the real mystery for the residents is how he made all his money. Aeon isn't interested at all and gives her husband the cold shoulder. That night, Mu-jin takes it a step further and offers to let her stay in the apartment rent-free. It's a tempting offer that could help them a lot, but it also feels like they would be betraying their principles. Myrae is determined not to accept any help from her father, but Hyunja is all for taking advantage of the situation. He has no shame and even posts on Instagram about how cool his dad is. After some disagreements that night, Mu-jin sits down with Aeon at a local restaurant. She gets straight to the point and asks him why he's suddenly come back into their lives. Mu-jin finally admits that he knew they were living there when he bought the villa. He says it's because he wants to live with Aeon again. He claims he has changed a lot since they were apart and wants to prove it to her. However, outside the shop, Mu-jin grabs Aeon's wrists and doesn't let go until Myrae arrives. Myrae screams and suddenly Ta-pyong appears out of nowhere like a hero. He punches Mu-jin right in the face, causing a nosebleed. Myrae then jumps in and pushes Mu-jin over, leaving things in a chaotic state. We then flash back to the day before the fire at the villa. The landlord is outside drinking and dancing with Mu-jin. But later at the apartment, Mu-jin tells him it's over and to stop after the landlord throws something at the wall. What could this all mean? Ta-pyong teaches kids taekwondo, and his signature kick is the same one he used on Myrae's dad. So not only is he a hero, but he's also strong and popular with the ladies. At work, Myrae pulls him aside and begs him not to tell anyone what happened outside the mart. She threatens to get him fired, but also admits that it was satisfying to see him kick Mu-jin in the face. Meanwhile, Aeon decides to stay at the villa instead of moving out. When Myrae finds out, she's not happy and suggests they could take out another loan. However, they're already drowning in debt, so that's not a good idea. Myrae wonders if her mom is being influenced by Mu-jin's wealth, but Aeon quickly shuts that down, promising it's not true. Myrae confronts her dad, who refuses to give up his wedding ring. Instead, he plans to win Aeon back. Myrae is shocked and clearly unsettled. Mu-jin is so sure he can win Aeon over that he proposes a bet. The wager? Her entire alimony money, which with interest and inflation amounts to the value of the entire villa. The deal is set to take effect in 4 weeks, and it's officially signed and notarized the next day. Myrae also pays the rent for the month, keeping her pride intact. One important flashback from episode 2 shows Myrae seeing her father in trouble with lung sharks. The restaurant was completely wrecked and she was very upset. What we didn't see before is that she made her father promise to disappear and vowed that he was dead to her and should never come back. Now that he has broken that promise by buying the villa, it explains some of her current anger and resentment toward him. Meanwhile, there's a subplot with Choi Dong-jin, a resident of the villa who lives in the semi-basement. He doesn't trust Mu-jin and is nervous around him, especially after Mu-jin shows up at his apartment. Dong-jin wants his locks changed because he saw Mu-jin with the landlord the night before the fire. Lee Jong-hyuk, who is already suspicious of Mu-jin, supports this theory. The other residents start coming together to investigate if there's any truth to the rumors and spread stories about Mu-jin's past. They wonder if he went to prison or is an ex-convict. Mu-jin burning evidence on the rooftop and visiting a tofu restaurant add to the suspicion. They all get worked up, even thinking that Aeon and the kids might be involved in a murder cover-up. While they come up with theories, Mu-jin moves in and tries to win over Aeon. As expected, his first attempt fails. Mu-jin then tries a different approach. Mu-jin talks to Hyun-jae, who explains how tough things have been for them. He also mentions that Myrae hasn't had a boyfriend and that Aeon works at a department store. Mu-jin then decides to help them financially, slamming down his credit card. Hyun-jae is excited, but he's also shaken when he sees his old landlord outside. Apparently, this old landlord used to hit on Aeon and tried to break into their unit when he was drunk. Mu-jin is upset about this, and Jongin is also unhappy with him, adding to the list of people who dislike Mu-jin. At work, Myrae overhears the CDO and Ta Pyong in the elevator and discovers that the CDO is actually Ta Pyong's father. They think Myrae might reveal this, but she agrees to keep it quiet for now. Meanwhile, the villa residents are not so quiet. They are convinced that Mu-jin is an arsonist and responsible for the landlord's death. When Hwang Jin-hee, the woman with the kindergarten kid, approaches Aeon at work, Mu-jin steps in. Myrae also points out that Mu-jin is a stranger and not their father. Myrae is angry with Mu-jin because of his bad history, which she associates with destruction and misery. For example, the snack bar that got wrecked by loan sharks had to close down because of Mu-jin. After being scolded at work, the girls go home while Mu-jin stays behind and drinks a lot, downing shots of soju. Hyun-jae shows up with a lie detector, but everything it reveals is the truth. It's a strange attempt at lightening the mood, but it doesn't work. The next morning, Mu-jin calls Aeon and promises that no one will bother her anymore. He goes to the police station and decides to testify about the fire, offering information that could help with the investigation. Later, Mu-jin gathers all the residents and explains that he tried to buy the villa from the landlord and shows them his matches. He's upset that they bother Aeon, and his explanations win them over. Mu-jin even buys drinks for everyone to get them drunk. As they drink, Mu-jin sends Myrae a cheeky message, saying he's not giving up and will keep trying. In the epilogue, we see Mu-jin confronting the creepy landlord from earlier in the episode. He confronts him in a restaurant just as the landlord is about to harass a woman. Mu-jin warns him that he will kill him if he comes back to the neighborhood.